Welcome to the project. In this project, we are going to create a dad joke generator. As you can see from the final version of the project, we have a new morphism design, which we are going to make using CSS. Then we have a container in the middle saying dad joke generator. And if we click on this button, we're going to get a joke here that is a typical dad joke. If we click again, we're going to get another random joke. While we are waiting for the joke, we see updating and loading effect inside the text and the button. So we're going to learn how to create the loading effect using JavaScript. Also, we're going to learn how to handle the errors using try-catch statement. So we're going to use JavaScript to add these functionalities, and also we're going to use CSS to make this beautiful design. In the next section, we're going to start with the HTML part of the project. So see you in the next section. Welcome back to the project. In this section, we're going to create the HTML part of the project. As you can see, I have put the final version here for our comparison and to compare our project with the final version. As you can see, we have a title here, a paragraph showing the joke, and also we have a button here saying, "Tell me a joke." The first thing we need to do is to create an HTML file. So we need to open the Visual Studio Code. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, but you can use any text editor you prefer. So I'm going to open the Visual Studio Code. We need to close the Get Started tab, and here inside the File menu, we click on Open Folder. Here we can create a new folder, which is going to be our project directory, and we need to create the files inside that folder. I would like to create the project in my desktop, so I click here on desktop, and here we can click on the new folder to create a new folder, and I'm gonna call it the name of the project, which is Dad Jokes Generator. After writing down the name of the project, we can click or press enter to choose the name, and now we can click on the select folder to select the folder. This is going to open the folder inside the Visual Studio Code. As you can see here, inside the Explorer, we have Dad Jokes Generator folder. Now we can create the HTML file here. First, we close the Get Started tab again, and here we click on this icon to create a new file, or we can right click and click on new file to create a new file. And we call the file index.html. And this is going to open the file on the right side, which is completely empty, but we can use an exclamation mark to create an HTML boilerplate. So we write down an exclamation mark. This is going to suggest us an auto suggestion from Emmet abbreviation, which gives us this boilerplate. So we click on the first auto suggestion to get the HTML boilerplate. I'm going to explain this one briefly if this is your first project. So the first line here is the doc type tag, which is going to tells the browser what version of HTML we are using. As we are using HTML5, we need to have only HTML here. Then we have the HTML tag, which covers the head and the body tag. The lang attribute inside the HTML opening tag sets the language of the page. And as we are using a language in English, we need to set this one to EN. Then we have the head tag, which has the metadata tags and also the title tag. The first metadata tag sets the char set attributes, and HTML5 recommends us to use UTF-8 because UTF-8 nearly contains all the characters and symbols, so the users inside our website or the person who is using our website won't have any problem seeing the characters and symbols using inside our project or inside our website. The next metadata tag is the compatibility metadata tag, which tells the Internet Explorer browser to use the most recent rendering engine, which is Edge. Then we have the viewport metadata tag, which sets the width of the screen to the device's width. This means that when we are using a smaller screen like a mobile screen, the width of the browser, the width of the page would be smaller when we are using a bigger screen like a tablet or a computer. The next section is the initial scale level. This one sets the initial zoom level of the browser, and by default it sets to be 100%. So if you want to browser to be in 90%, you just put 0.9, for example. Then we have the title tag, which sets the title of the page. The title is now by default is document, but it can be anything else. So let me show you this one inside the browser. So for opening the HTML file inside the browser, you can go to this folder that you have created. You open the index.html file, or you can use an extension called Live Server that we have installed. If you want to install this one, you just use Ctrl+Shift+X to open the extensions, and here search for Live Server. This is the extension I use to create a live server. So you can here click on install to install the live server. And when you have this extension, you can just click here on go live to go and see this HTML file inside your default browser, which in my case is Chrome, Google Chrome. So as you can see, the website is completely empty, but it has a title document. Let's bring the website on the right side and the Visual Studio Code on the left side. Let's close the Disk Explorer section by dragging it to the left side, so we have more space on the left side. We can change the title to the name of our project, which is Dad Jokes Generator. You can see that the changes is applied in real time inside the browser. So if you have any problem with this extension, let me know in the comments so I can help you through the extension. So let's continue our project, and we go to the body section and add all other elements inside the project. So if you look at the final version, we can see, let me show you here by drawing. So we have a container at the middle. So it has a box shadow. You can see the container. This is just a div with a class of container. Then we have the title here, which is a head h1 tag. Then we have this one, which can be a paragraph or h2 tag. Then finally we have the button here. So let's start with the container. So we go to our website And inside the body section, we add a div with a class of container. We can do that by just adding a dot, and we just say container. And this is going to suggest us, as you can see, the emit abbreviation, a div with a class of container. Now we can choose this auto suggestion to get the div with a class of container. Inside this div, we're going to have a h1 tag with a class of heading. I usually use class because later we're going to use CSS to style this, for example, div or this h1 tag. So we can simply target them inside the CSS using that class. I'm going to show you how inside the CSS section. So we're going to create an h1 tag with a class of heading. I press enter to accept the emit. Then I write down the name of our project, which is Dad Joke Generator. So with the bigger G. So you can see it here. As you can see, it doesn't have any style. This is just the default styling. But later we are going to use we're going to use CSS to style this. All right. So after the h1 tag, we're going to have a paragraph with a class of joke and with the ID of joke. For ID, we add hashtag or #. So you can see we have a paragraph with a class of joke and ID of joke. I just write down here, for example, Dad Joke. This is just a hard-coded text. And later we're going to create a new joke each time we request from an API using JavaScript. But for now, we just hard-code it because we want to style it in the next section using CSS. After this paragraph, I'm going to add a button with a class of btn, short for button, and an ID of button. And this is going to create us a button with the class of btn and ID of btn. And here inside the button, we're going to say, tell me a joke. So that was it for the HTML part of the project. In the next section, we're going to use CSS to create the project like the one in the final version. We're going to add and create this container. We add this box shadow. We're going to create this title with the text shadow effect. And also we're going to create this button with this beautiful hovering effect. So see you in the next section for the CSS part of the project. All right, in the last section, we have completed the HTML part of the project. In this section, we're going to work on a styling of the project using CSS. If you look at the final version of the project, we can see that we have a background with a linear gradient color with 3 colors, the blue light, and we have a light pink, and also we have a light blue here. So then we have a container in the middle with a box shadow. We have a headline with the text shadow saying Dad Jokes Generator, and we have a paragraph at the middle, and finally we have a button with hovering effect. So the first thing we need to do is to create the CSS file of the project. We need to create it in the same folder. We can open the Explorer section using Ctrl+Shift+E, and here we click on this icon to create a new file, and we call it a style.css. Before using this CSS file, we need to add a link to this file within the HTML code. So we need to come back to the HTML code. Let me close the Explorer section. just after the title tag, we need to add a link tag to the style.css file. So we add and we write down link, and we can click on the third auto suggestion, the one with the CSS. Now we have a link tag with the relationship between the HTML file and the CSS file. Here, the href attribute defines the destination of the link, and as both files are located at the same directory, the destination is just style.css. Let's start with the CSS file here. I want to start with the body section, so I'm gonna go to our project page, and also let's start with the body section. As the body tag, we can target the body tag using body, and we open a set of curly braces. Here we write down our CSS code here. The first one is to remove the default margin of the browser. So we have some sort of margin as a default. We can remove that using margin 0. After that, I want to change the background color. So I'll just use the background, and I want to use a linear gradient like this. As you can see, the linear gradient is created by specifying a straight gradient line and then several colors placed along that line. So we're going to specify the line, then we're going to add the colors at the end. So first we add this one. I want it to be to left bottom. So this is going to left button. This is going to divide the screen from the diameter. And then we can specify the colors. So the first color is light blue. The second one is light pink. And the last one is light blue again. So let's refresh the page. So as you can see, we have the pattern, but it's repetitive based on the size of this body section, because the body is not defined yet, the size of the body. We can set the mean height of the body to be at least 100% of the viewport height. So this is going to set the height at least the size of the browser. So any zoom level, we see that the size is the same. And then we can bring everything to the center using display flex. We can use justify content center to bring everything to the center horizontally. Then we can use align item center to bring everything to the center vertically. But before using the align items, you also need to add this min height 100%. Otherwise, you cannot bring it to the center vertically. I want to change the font family to be monospace. This color, this font. And so that's it for the body section. So let's install the container and make it like this container. So the container, if you look at the index.html, the div has the class of container. Because it is a class, we can target that one inside the CSS file using dot. So we just say dot container. So let's first change the background color of that. I want to use RGBA, which stands for red, green, blue, and alpha. So we're going to create a color based on the red, green, and blue, and we're going to change the alpha value for transparency. So for the red, green, and blue, I want to use 255. And this is going to give us a white color. Then I want it to be 30% transparent by choosing 0.3 for the alpha value. This is going to give us a glassy design. And then after that, I want to add a padding. So we add a space around the elements inside the box using padding, and we're going to set it to be 20 pixels. Let's add a box shadow. So the box shadow is going to be 0. So let me show it here. So the box shadow changes the drop shadow from an outer shadow. So for changing the box shadow, we need to add 4 things to the box shadow: the x-axis value, the y-axis, the blurriness, and also the color. So the first one is the x-axis is going to be 0 for us. Then we have 6 pixels for the y-axis. We can see here, but it is completely solid. We want to add some blurriness to it. So I'm going to add 10 pixels blurriness. As you can see, it became blur, and also we have some shadow around the element too, but this is too dark to look like a shadow. We can change its opacity using an RGBA here as well, which stands for the red, green, blue, and alpha. For the red, green, blue, we add here 000, which stands for black color, and then I'm gonna add 0.3, which is 30% transparency for the alpha value. So now I'm gonna add the border radius because I want to make the corner of the box to be rounded. So 50 pixels for the border radius. And let's change the width of the container to be 85%. So this one is going to cover 80% of the screen. If you have a bigger screen, you have more space on the left and right side. And this is always actually responsive. For any device size, you have just the 85%. Finally, we're gonna add, I want to bring everything to the center using text align center, which is going to bring all the texts inside in the middle. Let's change the color of the text to be dark green. This is going to change the color of the text and this title. So that was it for the container part. Now it's time to install this heading. Inside index.html, we can see the heading, the h1 tag has a class of heading with the name heading. So we can target that one using dot heading. And here we can change the size by using font size. I want the size of the text to be larger with 35 pixels. Then let's change the font weight, which is the thickness of the font, to be 200. I want it to be very thin, but I want to change the font family to impact. The font family impact is very thick. That's why I have used the font weight 200. So impact, let me add this. That is not font weight, sorry, it's font family. So the font family I want to use is impact. the first one. So this is going to create a kind of solid and thick font. Now we can add some text shadow as well, so we can make it extend out more in the website. So we just change the text shadow. Text shadow is very similar to box shadow. It has the same parameters, X, Y, blurriness, and the color. So we can add 5 pixels for the x-axis, 5 pixels for the y-axis, 2 pixels blurriness, and also we can change the RGBA color, use the black with the 30% transparency, and we get this beautiful design. And also I want to add more space between the letters, so I'm going to change the letter spacing, which add the space for the current font. It is typically 0 length. For now the default is 0. If we use the normal, it's going to be 0. I'm going to use 2 pixels for that. So this is going to add some space between letters so we can easily read them. So after the heading, I'm going to install this paragraph, which has the class of joke. So we can target that one inside CSS by just saying .joke. And this is going to be similar. We're going to add a font size of 25 pixels to make it bigger. I want to change the thickness by changing the font weight to be 500. And also I want to add some margin around the text to be, for example, 40 pixels, because I want to have some space around this element. So that was it for this joke part. Let's install this button. This is the last things we need to install in our project. So the button has the class of btn. We can target that one inside CSS using .btn. First we change the font size to be 18 pixels. Then let's change the font weight to be 700. I want it to be a little bit thicker. Then let's add some border radius to make it rounded in the corners using border radius, and we can set it to be 5 pixels. Let's set the cursor to be pointer, so when we hover over it, we see a pointing hand like this. And finally, let's add some padding of 10 pixels to add some space around it. So that it's okay now, but we can work more on it. I want to add some background color and border color too to make it more beautiful. So we can set the background color to a RGBA with a white color with 30% transparency, which gives us the same color as the container. But when we have a border, it's going to stand out. So I'm gonna add a border color. So the border color I want to use is RGBA white, but instead of 30% transparency, I want to use 60% transparency. So it's going to be a very beautiful button. And I want it to be uppercase, so I'm gonna change the text transform. So let's add this here, text transform, and this is going to be capitalized or uppercase. I want all the letters to be uppercase. So this is going to uppercase the letters. Let's set the, I think that's okay. We can set the width too to be 300 pixels. So make it a little bit larger. And also I want to change the color of the text to be dark green too. The last things I want to do is to add a hovering effect. When we hover over it, I want to add some box shadow and some changing in the background color. So we can target the hover effect using the hover pseudo class by just adding a clone with hover at the end. And here we can change the background color. We use the RGBA, but instead of 30% transparency, which is the color of the button, I want to change it to 50% transparency. So when we hover over it, we see the different opacity for the background color. Then let's change the box shadow. So we add some box shadow. We set it to be 0 for the x-axis, 4 pixels for the y-axis, 4 pixels for the blurriness, and we use RGBA black color with the 30% transparency. And see, this is the shadow. It comes, but it's very fast. I'm gonna add some transition to make it smoother. The transition I want to add is I want to add the transition to everything with 300 milliseconds duration and with the ease effect. So this is going to be similar to this one. All right, so that was it for the button section, and also we have finished the CSS part of the project. In the next section, we're going to add more functionality to the project using JavaScript. We're going to sign up for an API which gives us a random dad jokes. And when we click on this button, we're going to fetch the new joke from the API, and we're going to add the updating and loading effect to the button and this text. So see you in the next section for the JavaScript part of the project. All right, in the last section, we have completed the CSS part of the project. In this section, we're going to add more functionalities to the project using JavaScript. The first things we need to do is to create a JavaScript file inside the folder that we have created. We can do that by just opening the Explorer section using Ctrl-Shift-E. And here inside the Explorer section, we can right click, or we can just click on this icon to create a new file. And we can call the file index, or some people say script.js. It doesn't matter, it's just a name. So index.js. Now we have to add a link to the index.js file within the HTML file in order to use the JavaScript. On the contrary to the CSS file, instead of adding the link at the top inside the head section, we need to add the link to the JavaScript file at the end of the body section. And the reason for that is we want these elements to be loaded first inside the browser, and then we can have access to them and manipulate them using JavaScript. In order to have a link between the HTML file and the JavaScript file, we need to add a script tag here. We just write down SC and we click on the second auto suggestion, the one with the src. The src is the destination of the file, and as both files, I mean the index.html and index.js, are located at the same directory, we can just write down index.js for the address of the file without any slash or other things. So we can use the JavaScript file now inside the project. Let's close the Explorer section so we can see everything inside the project. The first things we need to do to add an event listener to this button. So when we click on the button, we're going to call a function. So we go to, first we need to see that which ID the button has. The button has the ID of btn. So we can just target that one using a method called getElementById from JavaScript. So we need to create a constant here, and we call the constant btn, which stands for button, and we add el at the end, which stands for element. So we just say const btn element. This is just a name. You can name this one anything you like, but this is just a convention, and this is the way I used to name everything inside JavaScript. We want to target the browser, everything inside browser, so we should target the document inside the browser, and we can use the getElementById method to call that ID, which is btn. The ID of the button was btn. So now we have access to that element, so we can add the event listener to the button now. So we just say btn element dot add event listener, and the event we want to add is click. So when we click on this button, we want to trigger a function, and we want to call the function. You can call it anything you want, but I'm gonna call it get joke. So this function is going to get a joke when we call it. So I'm gonna create the function here. I call it get joke, just for testing that our JavaScript file is working or not. So I'm gonna console log something. For example, I just say clicked. So now inside the browser, let's open the console using F12, or you can use Ctrl-Shift-C, and here inside the menu you choose the console. So make sure the console is selected here, and as you can see, it is completely empty, but when we click on the button, it should the console log. So maybe we need to refresh the page because we didn't use it for a while, so we need to refresh the page. Now I click on the button, you see that it console logged clicked. If you click again, we see double click, so it has the number 2. So we can add more and more. Instead of just console logging click, we want to fetch a joke from an API. So the API I want to use for fetching random jokes is called API Ninjas. So if we search for API Ninjas on Google, So when you search API Ninjas on Google, there is a website in the search result called api-ninjas.com. So if you click on this website, this is a website that offers almost, they claim the 68 data APIs. So if I show you the APIs, when we click here on the top on API, they have plenty of APIs. For example, you can get the animal details, you can get air quality, airports data, you can get a random cat image, you can get the information about cities, cocktails, and etc. The one we want to use is this dad jokes. If you click on it, they're going to show you the demo of how it works. For example, the sample request URL, this is a live demo. There is a URL, the URL address, let me zoom this, you can see it better. The URL is api.ninjas.com/v1. This is the version of the API. And we just add dad jokes. We can set the limits. So it sets the limit to 1. So when we click on send request, this is going to give us a random joke here. So this is a joke comes, my wife and I were out for dinner or something. So this is the way it works. But if you copy this one and go to a new place and add the limit 1 and press enter, it doesn't give you anything. It doesn't give you the joke, and it gives you an error saying missing API key. So we should see it now. So we need to apply for the API key. And also, if you don't see it like this, I have an extension installed on Google Chrome called JSON Formatter. So just go and install this JSON Formatter on Google Chrome. This is going to help you to see the JSON files like this. If you haven't installed this one, you should see it like that one. Error missing APIs. That is fine too. But for having the seeing and which, for example, it is the object or other things, it's better to install that extension. Getting for the API is actually, it's simple and it's free for 50,000 requests. So if you go to the premium section, you can see the annual one doesn't have. If you choose the monthly, they have a free API request, $0 per month, but it's limited to 50,000 API calls per month. That is enough for you to start your projects and just build your website. But if you get more API calls, you can buy the, for example, developer or learner or business account. So this one, you can have up to 1 million API calls per month. But this API is actually for all of them. For example, if you use other APIs, so this 50,000 is for all of them together. So if you have 2 websites, you have to be careful to use it. So you can just get the, for example, $20 per month. So you have 1 million calls a month. So that's going to help you to build more projects. So I'm going to build more projects using this website later. But for today, we just create the Dad Jokes one. In order to get the API, you need to sign up here. For example, I sign up with one of my emails. I have signed up with another email. I'm going to change the email. So that's my name. And this is my email, code with sahand@gmail.com. So let's choose a password. So I just choose something I can remember. All right. So after that, we can click on register. So now we need to check our Gmail account. Let me check my Gmail. And I should get the API, this email, your API Ninja verification link. If you click on verify email, you can verify your email account and then you can log in and use the website. So I already, as you can see, your registration has been confirmed. Now I can come back to the website and log in with my email and my password. So let me quickly add my details. All right, so now, as you can see, now I'm in my account, so I can get the API key here. So, and this is going to show us how many calls we already done. So you can just track of your website data from here too. So when we click on the show API, you can copy your API key. So don't use my API key because I'm gonna change it after the video, but you can simply sign in and get this free API key and use the website. So I'm gonna click here to copy it, and let's come back to the index.js and let's create a variable here called API key, and this is going to be equal that API key, and I put it inside a clone. So that was it for this section, and let's go back to the API and I'll show you how this one works. If you go to the Dad Jokes, so this one is actually for the requesting, but for the API, we need to add the API. If you look at the JavaScript here inside the code examples, you need to add the API key here inside the headers. We can simply do that one by just adding it as an option. And when we are fetching, we can add that option to get that one. So the method is get and the option, and we need to add the API key inside the headers. So let's do that one. I'm going to show you how to do it. So we create another constant and we call it options. And this is going to be equal to, first we just define the method. The method is get because we are requesting for the data. We want to get the information, so we just say get method. And for the headers, you just have to write down headers. And the headers is an object which has the X dash. X is capitalized, is uppercase. API should be like that. API, uppercase, dash key should be capitalized too. And this one is equal to the API key that we have created here at the top. So in this way, we can pass the options to the request and get the information. So instead of getting the jokes, let me fetch the data. So I'm gonna create a constant and I call it response. Response, I wanna get the data and put it in this response. So we use a method called fetch, which is coming from the JavaScript. If we have to add the two things here. We need to add this address here. I'm gonna copy this one. I'm just gonna create another variable here. This one, I'm gonna call it, I create a constant and call it API URL. And this is going to be equal to that address that we have copied, but the limit should be 1. So you add a 1 here too. So for fetching, we need to pass this API URL. And also we need to pass the options that we have created here at the top. So two things we need to add for the fetch. Now we get the response, but we need to convert this response to the JSON file so we can see it inside the console log, or we can use this data. Otherwise, we cannot use it. So we just create another constant and we call it data, and this is going to be equal to this response that we get dot JSON. JSON is a method inside JavaScript to convert the data to JSON. So now we have the data. Let's console log the data and see what we have inside the data. Okay, so let's go back to our website, which is here. I'm gonna open the console using F12. When we click on the button, so first we got an error. We said the is not a function. This means that response is empty actually. So let's see what mistake we have done. So the API URL is this. We got the API key. That is correct. The method is get. This is the headers. So I close everything, this one, and I pass the API URL and the options. So let's see. So the things here, because maybe we are changing the JSON before we get the data. Because this the JavaScript works like that. It goes one line by line. It goes to this line. Before getting the data, sometimes can go to the next line. We need to wait to this line, get this response, and then change it to JSON. But this one is not possible if you just use the fetch. We need to change this one to asynchronous. We need to add a wait here to wait for the response. But when you use await, you need to change the function to asynchronous. So this is going to wait here, fill this constant, and then this is going to change it to JSON. And also we can add a wait here, so to wait for the changing to the JSON too, and then we console log the data. So let's try it now. So when we click now, you see there was a delay and we saw the results. So that was the problem first time. So we got an error. So now we got the result, and this is a joke you can see here. Each time we click on the button, we should see a new joke. So I click again. After a few seconds, we see another joke which is completely different and it's unique. So this is going to create a random jokes each time we click on the button. So we got this information. Now we need to fill this inside this one and see the result. So this is an object because it has this bracket, and then so this is an array. Sorry, so we need to tap to this array, which is only one, which we just have to say 0, the first element of the array. So let's console log this one. So instead of the array, now we just got this object which has the joke inside this joke. So we can tap to the joke too. We just say dot joke. Now if we console log, we should just see the joke here. All right, so we should fill this section with the joke. But how we get this one and how we change it? So inside the index.html, we can see that that joke this is just a paragraph, and the ID of this paragraph is joke. So we can target that one inside the JavaScript by just creating another constant, and we call it joke element. And this is going to be equal to document, and we use the method get element by ID, and the ID is joke. So now we have access to this element. Now we can change the text inside the element using inner text method. So we just, instead of console logging, I'm gonna just say joke element dot inner text. So this is going to change the text inside that element, and this is going to be equal, remember, data, the first element of the array, and then joke. So now if we click on this button, we should see, instead of that joke, we should see a joke here after a while. As you can see, each time we click, but you know, there is a delay because we need to get the information from the API. So instead of just waiting and we don't know it's really working or not, we need to add some loading effect. So instead of showing this text when we click, we can say just updating. So let me do it for you. So when we click for the button, we call this function, and before fetching the data, we change this joke element dot inner text to, for example, we just say updating. All right, we just say updating. When we click, we see updating, and then we see the result. And if you click again, we see updating. So let me add some dots here to make more sense. Okay. But the other things, there is another problem. When we click, we can click again, and this is gonna mess up. So when we are waiting for the response, I'm gonna disable this button, and we just say here loading 2. So when we are waiting, I'm gonna disable the button. We have access to the button because we have brought the button here, and we call it btn element. So we just say btn element here. First, I wanna disable it. So I'm gonna target to disabled and set this one to true. So I'm gonna disable it. And also I wanna change the inner text of inside it, the text inside it, to be loading, for example. So anything can be, but I just write down loading. So when we click now, the button doesn't work and it's loading. But it doesn't work now, even we got the joke. So after we get the joke, we have to return the button to the normal one. So I'm gonna copy this one. After getting the joke here, I'm gonna set the disable to false, and the text would be tell me a joke. Okay, so I'm gonna click, it's gonna update. When the joke comes, the button comes back to tell me a joke, but now it's loading. Okay, so we have added these situations, the loading effects. The other things is important when you're working with API is catching the error. For example, if you go to the network, inside the network you can, like by simulation, you can just, for example, make the internet slow. Even you can make yourself offline. So when I click offline, actually I don't have the access the internet now inside the browser in this page. So when I click on the button, this is going to show the updating all the time, but I don't know why it's showing the updatings. So I'm gonna click here more, or this is not efficient. So if an error happens or there is no response from the API, we should see an error here saying, for example, an error happens. But how do we know that an error happens? So instead of just putting everything here, we can use a method called try and catch. So try and catch, when you write down try, you see inside the suggestion, there is a try catch statement. You can click on that. So we bring everything inside the try. So I'm going to cut this one inside the try. And then this is going to try to catch the data, but if an error happens, this is going to show us the error. For example, if I console log the error, let's see now, let's open it. Let's open the console using F12 again. You see that still we are offline. Let's bring it to the online, refresh this one so we get the data. Now I'm gonna put it to offline and I click on tell me a joke. Now I go to console, we see the error. As you can see, we got the error, and the error is internet disconnected. All right, so any error happens, you can get here, and also you can make some manipulation too. For example, here I say if an error happens, instead of showing this data.joke, let me copy this. Instead of this one, I want to say an error happens. Let me show it here. An error happens. Happened. Try again later. So now, if you come back to our website, let me refresh this one and put it again on offline. So if you click on the tell me a joke, when there is an error happens, we see that it says an error happened, try again later. So this is going to protect us from any error that may happen to the user. Maybe they don't have internet, or maybe the API doesn't work that time. So they're gonna see that an error happens, try again later. But the button is still loading, so we can bring back the button to the normal by just copying this section and put it here. So this is going to make the button enabled and change the inner text to tell me a joke. So let's try again. So I'm gonna click here. We have an error here because we don't have internet. So an error happens, try again later, and we have the button. We can try again and we got the error again. But if we have internet and we try, we see that we get the joke with no problem. All right, that was it for our project. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. We have learned how to use try and catch method to understand the error inside the project and the API request. We have learned how to use fetch to fetch data from an API. We have learned how to use an API by passing the options for the methods and the headers. And finally, we have learned how to apply the loading effects, which, for example, before the fetching, we have to say updating or loading. And after the fetching, we should show the result and bring back the situation to the normal by just, for example, saying that btn disable is false and bring back the text to the normal one. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. See you in the next project.